So today we're covering a topic that I haven't spoken about before. It's mergers and acquisitions. And I'm really thankful to have Mark Sainthill with me. Mark is managing partner for M&A at Cactus. Cactus is the UK's leading corporate advisory and growth consultancy for agencies. And Mark has a lot of experience in this area. He spent over 15 years in the media and marketing services sector. He's worked in-house for agencies and as a consultant to agency owners, and has acted both from a buyer and a seller side in corporate finance transactions. So big welcome, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, Jenny.
I'm delighted to have you here. Thank you so much for agreeing to it, Mark. I think I'm going to learn a lot. So would you mind starting off, just spending a couple of minutes talking about you, your background, and how you ended up advising agencies on M&A?
Yes. Well, I didn't originally think about going into M&A itself. I did a business degree, worked in the advertising media world, which I really enjoyed. So I worked at firms like Mediacom and Cake. So I always loved working in agencies, but I realized if I wanted to move into a management role, I'd have to have a kind of qualification, and accounting was something I was always good at. I was always good at numbers. So I got trained trained myself as an accountant, and started working in agencies as a management accountant and worked my way up. So I spent 5 years, I guess, of my agency career in Ogilvy in various commercial finance roles, working with a lot of account management people. And yeah, working on kind of global client accounts. And I spent, after about 5 years, I just realized I wanted to see a world outside WPP and use my finance and accounting skills to help founders and spend more time with them rather than kind of internal finance teams, which is what kind of often happens in big corporates. So I've started. I've been doing kind of M&A advisory for about 6 or 7 years now, and I left WPP and joined a small M&A consultancy and kind of learned the ropes, and been on some great journeys with agencies, sold a great number of companies, and done more of the kind of softer side, so the growth advisory, which is a sort of management consulting approach to helping agencies scale. So not just the bean counter, I'd like to think. So joined Cactus a year ago, and focus on M&A and selling businesses mainly. So
Brilliant. Okay, sounds like you've got a lot of experience. Before I dive into the questions about M&A, you said that you were commercial finance at WPP and worked with a lot of account managers.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to throw you a curveball question, because obviously a lot of account managers listen to this podcast. And can you tell me what's the one thing that you think account managers could be doing better in their role to have more of a commercial mindset?
Embrace finance and embrace your finance team, I'd say, rather than, I know it was always boring, and I could always see kind of the account managers rolling their eyes every month when we had to come round and review the accounts, but better to make use of them than to try and kind of escape them, I'd say. So the finance team, hopefully you've got a good commercial finance support within your organization to give you the right information to be better at managing your clients and the resourcing. If you don't, try and ask them to hire one.
Okay,
so you can't expect us to be good at finance or everything, because it's a very, what I learned about account management was you had to have so many different skill sets and hats on that you can't ever be expected to do everything. So the best ways I worked with them were those kind of account management or client services that we had a good relationship, and they probably took a disproportionate amount of my time, but it ultimately helped their accounts.
Great. So make commercial finance people your friend in your agency. That's the takeaway. All right. So what are some of the most common reasons that agency owners come to you for your M&A help?
Often they want to understand the value of their business today, and how do they grow value in their business, and what's the path to exit. So we often look at growth options, because there's not necessarily one route. Obviously, there's lots of businesses that are ready to sell and just want support through that process and finding the best buyer and the best deal. Sometimes we have agencies that need to restructure. Either there's shareholders that are looking to exit, or they're merging another business into theirs. And then sometimes we help businesses or agencies acquire other smaller agencies. So yeah, number of reasons around really their kind of growth options for them, and just considering how they get the most value out of their agency.
And do you find, Mark, because obviously I know that you network with an awful lot of agency owners, you spend most of your time with agency owners. Would you say that most agency owners have an exit goal or plan?
A mixture, really. I think some people love running their agencies and never kind of feel like they'd ever sell them. I think when times are tough, they, often they look and go, "Do I want to do this alone?" And I think, lockdown and COVID kind of put a lot of agency owners, either their agencies in difficulty, or put huge amounts of stress on them. So I think I think a lot of people, and then when you reach a certain age, maybe, or life events, and you have kids, you want to have this kind of plan in mind, or you realize that you can't grow your agency beyond where you've got it, and you need to be part of a bigger group. So it's not necessarily all about money, but yeah, often people are kind of stuck in the weeds of survival rather than planning ahead, which is, and they tend to not think about selling until they feel like they've hit certain metrics. But yeah, no, there's always half the people kind of have an exit in mind, definitely.
And I suppose, I mean, there's lots of books and resources around building your company from the beginning as if you're going to sell, even
Mm.
if you don't have the intention to sell. Do you think that's generally good advice?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think it's useful to have. Well, first of all, it's good to have a really kind of concrete plan, whether for whatever reason that is. But I think, yeah, some people kind of start an agency organically because they've left and they've wanted to run their own thing, and it's just sort of grown. But I think having an exit in mind is useful, and what kind of scale you get to. I think you do need to have flexibility in the plan and always be considering um, whether what you're doing is working. I think you'll find out from your clients and your success and your growth. And if those things are working really well, there'll be buyers who want to acquire your business. So I think as long as the fundamentals of your business are strong, there will be buyers who will come knocking on your door. You might have to do a bit of marketing and sort of brand awareness, but you'll know you're on the road to success when people start knocking on your door. But realistically, it won't be before you've reached, 1.5 million, 2 million revenue, where your agency's reached a size that it's going to, be kind of additive to their group.
Gotcha. Okay, that's really useful to know. So, if someone's listening to this and they think, no, I absolutely want to sell my business, what advice would you give? Because some people probably think, well, look, I know I'm a good 5 to 10 years off actually doing it, but what would you say are the core things that they need to either consider or put in place so that they're building it, and at the point that they do want to sell it, it becomes easier?
Mm. Yes, it's a good question. I mean, timing is everything, and it's quite hard. You've got to time. You need a crystal ball, essentially, slightly, because you don't know when the market's going to shift, when competitors are going to come in, whether there'll be a change in the kind of media landscape. So you always have to be prepared for kind of change in the industry, but expect the journey to be 5 years plus, for it not to be a kind of linear growth, or hockey stick, as some people might hope. And so you'll go through a number of these kind of hurdles of growth, and you'll have to restructure your business, restructure the kind of clients you go after and your proposition. So just be prepared that it will take a few more years, and great if you can get it done sooner. And then once you're ready to sell, remember the exit process and getting ready will take a year, and the sale, and then you'll be tied in for 3 years, probably 2 to 3 years, into any business, any acquirer. So consider that as part of, you know, realizing the value for your agency.
Okay, interesting. And how much bearing does the market have? Because I hadn't actually considered that. I was thinking it could be any time, but you obviously are very in tune with what's happening in the market at the moment. And would you say that there's moments in time that you've seen that this is a really good time? And if so, why? Like from a market perspective?
Yes, I think kind of emerging technologies or kind of new media. I mean, TikTok's a good example of. I think if you're working on TikTok and you're one of the, you know, a creative studio for TikTok, you'd be hitting a really good sweet spot in the market at the moment. There's also, you know, there's not much appetite for consumer facing agencies for obvious reasons. So B2B is very strong. So there are things where, you know, it's the economy, it's technology, it's regulation. I mean, at the moment, you know, Facebook or Meta is their advertising models not in a good way. So, you know, those kind of businesses aren't going to be performing well, then it's not going to be as attractive to buyers. But you know, it's all you know, you do need to focus on the fundamentals of your business. So, you know, making sure you've got a kind of niche, interesting offering for your clients, but something that would fit within a group. So we talk about commoditized services versus something that's a bit more kind of scarce or unique. But a lot of the time, being a kind of services business, it's all about the leadership team and the people and what you built and your culture, because that's if that doesn't work for a buyer, whatever services you're providing, they'll be put off, and often it will kill the deal.
So many questions I've got written down. Can we go back a step to what you said about Facebook and Meta, like the ad model? What's broken about the ad model? Tell me a bit more about that.
I mean, ever since kind of GDPR and these kind of data privacy rules have come in, it is all around the ability to target audiences, and essentially Apple have also blocked or asked their users to allow or not allow their data to be tracked. And most people, more than half, I think 70-80% of people have now blocked Facebook being allowed to track their activity or track who they are. So that wealth of data that they use to target users or audiences has gone. And also they've been fined at the beginning of this year. I think it's something like 400 million by the EU over, you know, not using customer data in the wrong way. So it has already been, you know, advertisers have already seen a huge drop in performance of Meta, and that's, you know, across Facebook and Instagram. So they're going to have to scramble to be able to better target audiences and get results for the advertisers. Otherwise, that money's just going to move away.
So this, you would say, is impacting the more kind of social media agency leanings, like that the agencies now that are mostly doing Facebook advertising and, you know, paid social, paid search. They're the ones that are being affected by this.
Yes, exactly. I mean, unless they've got a multi-channel approach, if they're very heavily reliant on Meta to do their paid social. I mean, e-commerce, I mean, it's been obviously huge for kind of e-commerce brands to use that channel to drive sales. So yeah, that's probably one example of where that model, their advertising model is going to have to change, or agencies are going to have to find other workarounds.
Do you know any examples of any agencies that have had to do a workaround? And if so, what are those workarounds?
Yeah, I mean, there's a growth marketing agency that I interviewed on the Agencynomics podcast recently. There's never a single channel. It depends what the client is. It depends what the outcomes they're trying to get, the audiences they're trying to reach. So, you know, obviously TikTok is great for younger audiences. There's a lot more buying across connected TVs now. There's a lot more audience segmentation. Pinterest is also much more shoppable, and Shopify as an e-commerce platform is also building up their own first party data. So there's lots of different channels that agencies can now use to buy media. It's just a question of, picking the right channel and being an expert in that channel.
So that's great advice, actually, for any social media agency listening, performance marketing agency listening, that want to kind of steer their client in the right direction. It's all about finding out what their outcomes are, and then perhaps taking a wider view of what they could do differently, different channels. The other thing you said was, we were talking about sort of the optimum time to sell, or what an agency owner has to have in place. And you said if they have a niche offering, is it a niche as in an industry vertical, or is it kind of more of a horizontal service niche that makes it more
It could be
attractive?
one. It can be one. It could be one or other or both. I think the agency world is so competitive. I think you can't be a jack of all trades at all. I think you either decide to, go after particular consumers, whether it's kind of the millennials or Gen Z now. I'm probably a millennial and I've got old. Or you look in healthcare, or you look in B2B. Specific areas of B2B are helpful. And then I guess with services, there are I guess it's quite hard to be full service unless you have significant scale. So if you're focusing on kind of creative, be a very good creative studio. So I think it's for your clients and for your focus and your efficiency, it's better to be very clear and try and have a kind of simple service offering that avoids you kind of failing all your clients, or not being clear who you best work with, I guess.
I suppose it's like the old principles of niching, isn't it? The more niched you are, the more expert you appear, and the more you can charge, etc. The other thing you said about was selling your business. A lot comes down to the leadership, the people, and the culture. Can you talk to me a bit around that? Like, what do you see is, I don't know, but for acquiring businesses, what are they looking for specifically? Or is that part of your role to match the cultures? And if so, what are you looking for? And how do you decide whether that potentially could be a good fit?
It's a good question. I mean, there's no shortcut. It's a two-way process when you're selling an agency and introducing the founders to buyers. It's a two-way thing, and it comes to a point when actually the buyer needs to kind of work quite hard to impress the sellers that it's the right fit. And there's things like considering how the businesses will fit together, protecting the team and making sure they don't get subsumed, and there's opportunity for growth and cross-selling of clients. So usually it's as much as do you get on, and are you having good conversations, and you sort of your philosophy about running companies and looking after teams is aligned. That's usually it's chemistry, I guess, kind of. And you'd expect, if at a leadership level, if there's a fit, that should filter down into the rest of the business. But they'd also want kind of breadth of leadership team and quality of those leaders in terms of experience, which would ultimately fill gaps in the acquiring group. So it's a bit of a combination of experience and that kind of chemistry and fit.
I'm going to admit something. I haven't got a good experience of being involved in an M&A, because when I was at Publicis Life Brands, I was general manager, and it was essentially a reverse takeover. It was positioned as an acquisition, but that cultural fit was not a fit. And so I actually left as a result. So that didn't happen. That kind of maybe getting to know each side, spending the time to see and evaluate whether it's a good fit. How would you advise, to make sure that no one has to go through what we went through, what would you advise is the best way of assessing fit? How long does it typically take? What are the parameters? Are there any particular things that you do to really make sure that it's genuinely a good fit?
Yeah, another good question. I mean, ideally, what you have is as you're growing your business, you're understanding who your potential buyers could be, and who's complementary to your agency, and partner with them and try and do a project with them, and hopefully that would lead to you spending more time with their team and your team spending time with their team. Because once you get into an M&A process, you don't really want to be telling your team that's going on, because it will be very disruptive. So it's one there, the key staff will be introduced through a process, but the rest of the team, you don't really want to say. So I think if you could, the perfect M&A transaction is that, it starts from these two agencies work really well together. There's a really good fit. We've worked on some great projects together. We've helped each other. Now let's just let the advisors and the lawyers thrash out a deal, and let's work together as soon as possible. So as soon as it becomes a financial transaction, it becomes less. There's less of that kind of obvious sort of synergy. So it would be a warning sign if it wasn't addressed up front in terms of that kind of cultural fit.
That's a really good shout, actually. That's a really good piece of advice. Do a test project together, work together, because you're going to see a lot in a short period of time. And obviously you can, make up a project to work together on. And I suppose, do you find that, a lot of agencies who perhaps don't have all of the skill sets partner with other agencies? Is that usually a trigger to start thinking about, oh, we work so well together and actually we're complementary. Why don't we come together in some way? Do you find that happens a lot?
Yeah, a mixture really, but yes, I think agencies now need to, now that there's so many kind of services that are required by these big clients, and that's another reason that kind of M&A happens, is you reach a size, and really what clients are looking for is one agency that offers all the different services, rather than having to manage multiple agencies. So it starts as sort of bit of smoke and mirrors, but the bigger agencies do pull together other agencies to be able to answer the entire brief. So it is obviously very, very common. It's just not often do kind of small agencies like having to kind of work into a bigger agency, because they never get paid on time and they never get the fees they want. So, but as you say, it's helpful if that kind of relationship is tested, at least, to see whether it's worth continuing a partnership.
Definitely, absolutely. What do you find are the kind of biggest mistakes that people make when they kind of start on this journey of looking to, merge or acquire? I mean, maybe start with, well, whichever one you want to start with.
Merging businesses together is obviously quite difficult, because they've got to be sort of equal in some way, but you don't really want to be in a position where you've got a deadlock of two businesses and two equal stakes. There usually has to be one that is the majority owner and controller. Otherwise, there tends to be kind of paralysis by kind of making decisions. So on the merger side, it has to be an absolute slam dunk. Otherwise, it just, you either never come to an agreement, or if it happens, the business doesn't succeed together because of the differences. So they've got to have a very aligned journey together, and potentially when that exit would be. And that's actually the same with acquiring a business. You don't want to acquire someone who's going to disappear in a year. You really want someone who's kind of hungry to work with you as part of your kind of the buying group, rather than just be kind of sailing off into the sunset with some money. So that's always important. So yeah.
Okay. Who's buying right now? Like, who are there? Is it usually typically big agency groups? Is it tech companies? Is it management consultancies? What trends are you seeing in terms of acquisitions?
Probably in marketing, I mean, I guess marketing and IT as well. I mean, there's lots of private equity backed groups of very different scales. Some small, buying agencies that are 1 million, 2 million revenue, and then very, very big private equity houses that are backing businesses with hundreds of millions. So they are set up with a buy and build strategy in mind, to scale groups, fill in capability gaps, and then move it on to the next private equity house. So they know how to do M&A, and it's a very professionalized process. So that's a big kind of group. There's also a lot of cross-border M&A happening. Just businesses. We sold a business to a US group from the UK, which worked, and then one from UK to France. So I think where there's a geographical need, that makes a deal, the rationale, very easy. So sometimes doing kind of M&A within the same market can work, and sometimes there's problems with it. But yeah, I think there's lots of emerging groups in kind of all kind of specialisms, whether it's digital or creative or luxury or B2B, that have got despite the environment and interest rates, there's still a lot of private equity money. So I'd say that's the strongest part. I mean, the tech giants, they acquire kind of niche technology rather than services businesses. But in the consultancy side, with Accentures and some of the big IT consultancies, they're always looking, but they're looking for big acquisitions that are going to move the needle, or something very niche. So it's unlikely you'll be bought by Accenture unless you're over 100 people, given their obvious size and scale.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Before I go on to the last kind of tranche of questions about the future and the agency landscape, can you just describe the steps that you go through? You said the majority of agency owners come to you, and one of the first things they want to know is, how much is my business worth?
Mm.
But after that step, if you like, how do you work out what the value is? And then where do you take them? What's your process for working with them?
Yeah, the crude metrics are around revenue and profit, but there's lots of qualitative points that decide. So usually from an acquirer will look at the business based on their profit, usually on a services business, and come up with a multiplier based on the quality of that business and the management, the services, all those factors. And then it will be based on their margins. So if they're doing more than 30% margins, that's a driver of valuation. If they're growing very quickly, and if they've got a very scalable model in an interesting part of the market, that all drives a kind of higher valuation. So we'd look at that as the basis of how the business is valued, and then really focus on which buyers would be the best strategic fit and cultural fit. But often they come from different directions. So whether it's geographical or whether it's a complementary business or agency in the UK. So we tend to pick a selection and see which ones the seller finds the most attractive, because it's not just the headline financial valuation. It's what would their roles be within that group? What is the ability for that buyer to help accelerate that growth and deliver that growth? And I always like to think that people would want a future role in that group beyond the earnout or beyond when they sell the business. So I think that's a good sign for when you feel like something's where it's going to be a good transaction, is that there is a role for them that they'll be excited about going forward.
Do you get any resistance to that? Because I'm just kind of thinking, if let's suppose I'm an entrepreneur with an agency owner that's working, on my own for 15 years, growing the business, and then I get acquired by a bigger group. Do you find that those entrepreneurial type people end up settling into a role which is effectively an employee again?
Mm.
I know they've got a big fat paycheck, so that might be a good sweetener, but you're still having to kind of, from doing your own thing, making your own decisions, suddenly the confines sometimes of a group.
Mm.
You find what? How do you find that transition?
Yeah, I'm sure they find it difficult. I mean, losing control of their baby and their agency, and having to kind of, you know, operate under different ownership is difficult. And I think some people are inertly entrepreneurial and they don't like to work in big corporates. So they probably already got their mind on what their next business idea is and their next, the business are going to start. So either that buyer has to find a role within their group that enables them to do that, or they have to accept that they're going to have to find the management team to take on the responsibilities that they had. So I don't think a buyer can expect that they're going to make that founder happy or kind of create a role for them. I guess everyone's pragmatic, that some people might want to have a couple of years off, or they might want to start a new business. So
Yeah. Again, having come from a group like Publicis where there was, they were very acquisitive. I saw it multiple times with different characters coming and going. You wrote a really good post on LinkedIn, Mark, and I would recommend anyone follow you on LinkedIn, because I really enjoyed reading your posts. And you were talking about sort of the agency landscape, and also what's coming up for agencies in the future. And I'd love it if you could just talk to us about what you see, what you're seeing, what's changing, what should agency owners and account managers be aware of in this evolving landscape.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like I've got the kind of in-depth knowledge of kind of future technologies, but no, I mean, I think I'm always interested to see what new agencies pop up, how brands and agencies adopt those technologies. I mean, I think obviously there's AI and chat GPTs popped up, sort of out of nowhere, and that's going to be disruptive. And we talked about Web3 for the whole of last year, and there was sort of mixed signals about how that's going to affect agencies and to what extent they could adopt some of those technologies and create new revenue streams. But I think the example of chat GPT was great, because we've been talking about AI for a few years, and it crept up very quickly. So
Yeah, didn't it?
so I think it's got to be, you've either got to have someone in your agency that loves this, loves exploring them, sharing ideas. You used to have the head of digital that used to love all things kind of digital or digitally related, that would kind of impart their wisdom on the future of the industry. But it's even more important now. So I think it's really about, we talk about a cactus and planning with agencies around the now, the next, and the future. And I think you do need to not start a new agency or switch off all your traditional revenue streams, but at least start considering experimenting, innovating, exploring the new technologies. And obviously clients are so busy they don't have time to understand how they work or how to adopt them. So you should be that should be your part of your relationship with them, is to impart your wisdom and knowledge on them too. So
I really want to reiterate what you've just said. I think it's really great advice. If you can find one or two ambassadors in your agency that are really switched on and really keen to keep ahead of what's happening with the changes and the trends, then you could start with internal learning, having lunch and learn sessions where everyone's been brought up to speed with what's happening. Because you're right, the chat GPT thing really took us by surprise, didn't it? All of a sudden, well, I've got it open most of the time. I don't know if you're using it, but I just find it so useful. I mean, do you think, it might be an unfair question, do you think this is going to disrupt copywriting agencies or any particular type of agency?
I think it will disrupt anything to do with
Everybody.
business or professional services. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's quite scary to see the power of it. I mean, this is only kind of version 1. So I think it's really, if you can embrace it, it can create huge efficiency. So it can rewrite code, simplify code. So the whole kind of development and engineering side of the digital world is potentially significantly disrupted. as well as kind of creative services. When they bring in image and they bring in video, and beyond copywriting, it's going to be I'm already speaking to agencies that are cutting out design time, video time, and finding ways of creating kind of rapid content through these tools. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it's regulated, if it's all possible. I mean, I've listened to a few podcasts about it, and it's sort of open source, but someone must own some of the intellectual property that's being used. So we'll see. I don't think it's possible to regulate it. I think we just have to embrace it and see how you can help your clients with it, whether it's reducing time, reducing cost, or efficiency within the agency. So I think it still needs a human touch, but I think it'd be the wrong thing to ignore it or not embrace it. Definitely.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. As you say, if it's cutting down production time, that's going to potentially have an upside on profit margins. But if then you're passing on that cost to the client, or that saving to the client, then procurement teams are going to start getting more used to seeing, we're talking over a period of time. And then maybe that's going to ultimately squeeze the agencies at the front end again when they're pitching. So yeah, it's going to be a very interesting thing. Any thoughts on the metaverse? Because that was something also I know Cactus was talking about last year together with Web3.
Yes, I mean, I think it's sort of born out of the kind of gaming industry and interactive worlds. I mean, I think it's kind of merged into kind of e-commerce and other digital experiences, but I don't think there's a high level of adoption for, well, certainly people of my age, but I think there's a place for it, alongside physical experiences. But I think ultimately there's going to be the Google glasses and the overlaying of AR and experiences, rather than us being locked into these kind of virtual worlds. So I think it's I think it has been overhyped, but I think it's still at a stage where there is a lot of adoption to happen. I mean, Facebook have been giving away Oculus headsets. I mean, the fact is they're still quite expensive. So unless we're able to experience the metaverse in a kind of high quality environment with our phones or some kind of affordable headsets, it's going to be a long time before it's going to be, there's going to be mass adoption.
Yeah, good point. If Final question, if someone's listening to this and they've been thinking, oh, I think I'm well niched. I think we've got a very special, specialist area of expertise, and I've been considering selling. If they're going to approach you, what information should they have ready just to open up conversations with you?
Good question. I mean, I think what we usually do is start with a questionnaire that we let them go away with, that talks about their personal ambitions as well as their business ambitions. And I think there's, your valuation expectations, what kind of money you're looking for, and then we can work out whether it's achievable to sell in the short term, or there's still more work to do. So it's aligning kind of personal and shareholder ambitions with what's realistic around the quality of the business and the valuation of it.
Great advice. And just final question, have you got any parting words of advice, something that we haven't talked about that you think would be valuable for agency owners to consider or think about when it comes to M&A?
That's a really good question. I should have lots. I think consider M&A as part of your business planning, even if you're not going to exit. Make sure you write a business plan and consider that if you're looking to grow, one way could be to partially sell your business through private equity and have another event. There isn't a sort of one-stop route to sell your business and that's it. So I think understanding your options as part of your business planning, and every year or every 6 months consider that it could be a good route to growing or realizing more value. rather than just waiting until you think you're ready to sell and then trying to push the button then. I'd say that's definitely good advice.
Very good advice. Mark, thank you so much for joining me. You've shared lots of interesting information. I've been scribbling down notes as we go. I've learned a lot. So thank you so much. If anyone wants to talk to you about this, what's the best way of contacting you?
Get me on LinkedIn, or my email's on the Cactus website. And would love to meet agency founders. It's always a joy to meet these entrepreneurs and hear their kind of challenges and successes. So yes, please reach out if you want to have a chat.
All right, Mark, we'll
Hey,
leave.
Jenny. Very
Thank
nice.
you. We'll leave your contact details on the show notes. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you, Jenny.